My name is Mike Ryan. I'm the senior entertainment writer for Uproxx. And anyway, it's Billy Crudup. He's right here. Which one do you want? Oh, okay.
Whichever. No, this is my better side. This is good.
How is everybody? Well, first thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up because this is an amazing movie about these amazing women, and in the last 2 days, and you probably, unless you've checked your phones, you probably don't know this, Debbie Reynolds just passed away. So we've lost Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds in the last 2 days, and I just throw it to you, like what a loss.
Well, a film titled 20th Century Women, when we lose iconic women like that, I think it's at least worth noting in this context, as strange and shocking as it is. But I was reading the New York Times obituary about Carrie Fisher, and it spoke to the iconography of the female hero in mainstream films, and what it means to get to a point where a princess can be depicted in that way. And I think there is a correlation to the way that Mike is interested in depicting not just the 20th century women, but Dorothea in particular, what it means to be a strong matriarch, a mother, someone who is curious and questions their own independence and evolution, and is not necessarily aligned with every kind of ideology that's presented to her in her country, her gender, her time, and all of those questions I think are continue to be pretty relevant.
Now getting to what you guys just saw. First of all, my gosh, is there a better image this year than watching Billy Crudup and Annette Bening dancing around to Talking Heads?
I mean, thank you. I'm sure the answer is yes. I'm sure there's many better images than that. Mike had a very specific way that he thought William moved in the world. And as a child of the 60s and kind of the free love experiment, following his peers and girlfriends around from hippie gig to hippie gig, Mike was all interested in the arms and stuff, and he kept saying, more arms, more arms. And acting is not a dignified profession to begin with. So when you're with one of your heroes like Annette, trying to explore what more arms means, it can be a self-conscious experience. So I was very grateful to Annette, who was gloriously collaborative and good-natured, and the experience of playing that ended up being a real revelatory and insightful way to explore that character, who's mostly pretty reticent. I think one of the things that Mike was adamant about exploring with William is that for Lucas's character, he was kind of a specter. You know, he didn't know how to attach his identity as a adolescent male transitioning into adulthood to any male figure. And so to that end, narratively speaking, what in the world is going on? If this isn't a trailer for a movie of mine, I'm out of here. One of the ways that he wanted to explore it is creating a character like William that was sort of opaque and existed as someone to project things onto. And so to that end, getting to explore some of the things that were physically natural to him or exciting to, like that dance sequence, or discovering...
Did we lose our mics?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
That's my exit music.
No, I think they want you to dance.
Or I only for money.
Okay.
That's
okay.
really,
Fair enough.
But by the way, not a lot of money. It's really. It was it was really fun to be a part of.
I do have to follow up. What were you doing where Mike Mills has to say to you more arms? Like what was your just no arms? No arms?
Well, I mean, I guess I was just kind of exploring it, physically the way that I do music.
Yeah.
And that's not how I explore music.
Okay.
Like all that and stuff.
Right.
Anymore. I mean, yeah, that's it.
Okay. Has anyone here also seen Jackie this year? Because it's like this guy is having quite a 2016 and coming off Spotlight last year. Like, you're feeling good, right?
By the way, thank you for all of those plugs.
Okay.
And
with Alien Covenant coming out too soon.
they just keep coming. And I'm working on a show called Gypsy right now with Naomi Watts. So check that out.
And you were in Almost Famous. Available on Blu-ray.
This is a great.
Yeah.
I'm stoked I came. The fact of the matter is, when you've been acting for like over 20 years now,
Right.
When I started out, I was very fortunate early on in my career, and I was able to be a part of things in theater and film that were ambitious, intelligent, new, and interesting, and had some success. And when you're starting out, you have far more power and agency than you know what to do with. So you have to develop a philosophy really quickly, because people ask you questions about why you're doing stuff and why it's interesting. And the typical answer is, because they gave me the job, man. But that doesn't last for very long in a Charlie Rose interview, so you better start talking about aesthetics and interests, and after a while you've taken for granted the fact that you were in something that was successful. So, and to make a collaborative piece of any kind of art is a worthy undertaking, but almost inevitably a catastrophe. And so when movies like Spotlight and Jackie and 20th Century Women end up being resonant pieces of film for me too, and then for audiences, enough at this point to count your blessings, and I've been smiling from ear to ear for a while.
When I spoke to you a couple weeks ago for an interview, like we did for print, but you had this amazing quote.
What magazine was it for? You can plug yourself.
No, it's fine. No one needs to know. But no, you had this quote about, because I brought up that you seem to be in a lot of movies set in the 70s, and the first thing you said was, "Have stash will travel." Yes, you have an amazing 70s mustache. Every time
You're a gentleman for saying so. I think I've thought more about it since you asked me that question. It could be that my acting is arcane, and it only fits in the 70s.
You were worried you're getting typecast in the 70s. I had to bring up, no, you're an alien next, because that's the future.
It was the future, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But I think it's 2170. So, again, as an actor,
That's
you're
good.
grateful for any niche that you find yourself in. I mean, not everyone, but to be able to work is a real privilege as an actor, and to be able to work with people who are inspired and capable and creative is exceptional, and to have it happen several times in a row is rare. So I don't know what the fuck to say about that. It's just really lucky. It's really nice to be a part of. And also, Mike Mills is the kind of collaborator, as was Pablo Larraín and Ridley Scott and Tom McCarthy, that you kill to work with, because they give you the opportunity to take charge of your portion of the narrative with as much creative insight as you can bring to it. And that's not typically how you find yourself in a film. When you go to set and you're working a couple of days, everybody else has been there a long time, you don't want to screw up, and you know that if you start to mess around too much with your character and explore things, that you're just going to make for a long day for everybody, and most of it's not going to be in the movie. And so when a director says, listen, this is the part of your story that I want you to elaborate on and find some kind of voice in it, and I'm going to make room for that, it's special, you know. And actually, they better be doing it, because I didn't get paid anything for any of these movies. I mean, nothing. Probably cost me money.
Well, it's interesting. Right before we got in here, you were on the street, and people had you were nice enough to sign some autographs for some people, and someone had the Rolling Stone with Stillwater on it. I mean, how often do you see that pop up?
That was my brother.
Okay.
That's another thing that you kind of, when you back into something that ends up being lasting, because I like doing plays too, and one of the primary features of doing plays is that it's a temporary experience, that the value of it lasts in the moment that you're present with the people who are sharing this story with you. And it's not about trying to preserve it or attach yourself to it or covet it. And that's a romantic notion to me. And the same kind of thing, oddly, happened with Almost Famous, where we didn't have the kind of audience that certainly the studios wanted, and the agents and everybody else in the kind of infrastructure around it wanted, until like 15 to 20 years after it was. When was that movie? It was like 2000?
Yeah.
So 16 years after. It's really been the past 4 or 5 years that it's become a much more enjoyed movie. We couldn't get anybody to see it at the time.
What are the odds that guy was just walking down the street with that, and then you walk by? Like, that's amazing.
What are the odds? What are the odds he was out in front of my door this morning? I guess they're pretty good now.
They're pretty good now. One of my favorite lines in this movie, when I rewatched it last night, it was the second time I saw it, but it's like, I want to live in a world where you make your own shampoo.
When you see that line, you know it's a gift from God, and your job is to just not screw it up. And to get to be a guy who makes his own shampoo that was pretty sweet. I don't know, man. What would you do with that? It's a great line.
I don't know. I'm not
Just
an
say
actor.
it
I have no idea.
But just say it straightforward. Like, just say, I make my own shampoo.
I make my own shampoo. See,
He's
I'm terrible.
automatically interested.
I'm terrible.
I want to hear all about it. Do you know, it must be really hard to make shampoo. By the way, I didn't
I don't
learn
know
how
how
to
you
make
do it.
shampoo for this film.
All I know about soap or shampoo is from Fight Club, and that's not good.
But that's amazing that you make your own shampoo.
I don't. William does.
We're going to talk after this
Okay.
about improvising. Yeah.
Okay.
That was
Yes,
another thing that Mike was really interested in, because the first script that he wrote, it was written as though it was a short story. There was a lot of descriptive passages and not a lot of dialogue. And when you read that as an actor, all you can think is, well, do I have anything to say? Is there the character that's motivated to be in the world at all, or is it just going to be like a pantomime? And what it really was alluding to Mike's creative process in creating the character once he had the actors in place. And so that's not a regular experience for me in film. And it was a total and utter thrill. And there is a point in the movie where Greta's character, and Greta is just superb, and
Yeah, she's the best.
you know, I have to say, like, the experience of working with people who are after the nuanced and sophisticated work that Annette and Elle and Greta, who have been doing it, you know, for a while, when you get to participate in that, it's really, really exciting and rare. But so Mike encouraged us to develop our characters as it was happening, and there was a scene where she was saying to the dinner table that it's okay to use the word vagina, And I just imagine that William had had that conversation like 15 years before, and he was super comfortable saying vagina. And Mike just started, when they finally did the shots on me, he said, just keep coming up with William ideas. And I can't remember where it came from, but at a certain point, I thought, I'm gonna try to be a mentor to this kid and interrupt her social commentary with that insight about women and vaginas. And it was in the movie, so I was really excited that I contributed something like that.
And you spoiled the end to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Yeah. Sorry if you haven't seen that, because it has been ruined. But that's a great line too. It goes along with the shampoo line. Like you have to look at that and go, okay, that's going to play well.
There's another aspect to playing a character that appears infrequently, is that the things that you do have to say can resonate. And so when Mike gives you the opportunity, what he's doing is building a world of three-dimensional people, and that's not the regular experience for an ensemble, because it's a 2-hour narrative. You typically have time for a protagonist and an antagonist and maybe some supporting characters who are helping their story along. But you don't really have the time to get into the world, the frame of mind, the motivations of all the other characters, and that's all that Mike's interested in. So that was exciting.
Do you want to take some questions from them?
Sure.
How do we do this? Oh, okay.
With every role that you take, how do you balance filling in the backstory of your characters and simultaneously supporting the narrative? How do you sort of walk that line?
The director has to be able to articulate to me where this character fits in the narrative. And there are some times when, if you elaborate too much on the character, it'll become a bit of a red herring and not be interesting for the audience, because they're not following that storyline. So you can do a lot of work, you can be overeager and actually be quite professional and screw up the story. So it really has to do with understanding, the kind of score that a director is going to eventually create with his ensemble of instruments. And until you're the director, you're a tool in their vision. I mean, yes, you're a tool, but if you're an actor, you're a tool. But if you're a tool in their construction, and that's always the first thing that I'm interested in discussing with the director is, how can I help this story?
So this movie was, it's set in Santa Barbara. It was shot in Santa Barbara and the surrounding area. So I guess, what are your thoughts on what it means for a story as personal as this one to be shot on location?
It does give you tremendous insight, because Mike spent a great deal of time not just helping us to construct the lives for these characters, but exposing himself and what it was like for him to grow up in Santa Barbara at this period of time. And he took us around to the spots that inspired certain scenes in the movie, and he still has a really profound attachment to all of it. And there's an aspect of it that creates a responsibility to be protective of his history, and there's a part of it that's really helpful in terms of your creative insight into what this world is like. And it's just like, you have to tune, sort of what I was saying before too about creating a character. You have to tune what you're doing to the circumstances that are surrounding you. That's a really new kind of idea for me as an actor, because I think when you're starting out, your primary motivation is to exhibit your ability to elaborate on a character. And that's ultimately kind of a silly journey. So when Mike takes you through his personal space, it makes it easier to adapt what you're doing to the story.
There was one back here, right there, on the left.
Hi. I just wanted to say I think the film was obviously so brilliant. The narratives, as you expressed, kind of what it does for the conversation on gender, but then I think also all of these different conversations, almost like a coming of age story kind of reinterpreted in all of these different kind of circumstances in life, these different evolutions. And so I guess my question is, knowing that you're dealing with a character that's kind of, as you mentioned, like developing as we're witnessing it happen, how do you make sure that you're building that that personality as the story's going along, as you mentioned, it being kind of like more infrequently placed in the film, and not giving away too much? Like, it seems like such a delicate balance.
Well, truthfully, you put your trust in the hands of the director, because if you spend a lot of time constructing in your mind that this one moment that Dorothea says something to me is going to be the moment that I expose this facet of the character, which is a crucial part to moving on to the next facet, and he decides to insert a shot of a newspaper, your entire performance is done. You can't really try and be in possession of how you're going to manage your character's story. You have to count on the director to know where there will be insight, know where he'll give you space, and ultimately this construction is not the exact character that we created while we were doing it. It was the character that he found while he was editing it that fit into the story that he was trying to tell. There were a number of different scenes that William had a kind of slapstick, comic persona that he would put on for Dorothea to entertain her. And that was a great thing to explore while we were doing it. And it just wasn't, ultimately useful for him. So in the same way, you have to count on him to chart the trajectory of each step. And so your job as an actor is just to be present in the moment and understand what the event is that you're trying to create.
Anyone? We got right here. Oh, is this the last one? Okay, then
We're getting
right,
kicked
yeah,
out,
right here.
people.
Well, it takes from what you were saying about the humor. Was it hard to play? What we saw was a character who didn't use humor in your character. So was that hard for you to play that not to play up the humor?
Well, I think that William had a closeted sense of humor, and as I was saying, like, we had a space to explore that. And when that's happening internally, and you know that your character is just too shy to express it, or maybe not courageous enough, it's actually quite entertaining to play. There are things that are happening in your mind during that period of time that ultimately make them interesting and human to watch. You don't know what their secret is exactly. You can't tell what they're hiding or why they don't speak. But for me, it was that William had a terrific sense of humor. He just didn't know where to put it in. Yeah, he was for sure a lovable and caring man who was a bit lost, and that was I never wanted to stop playing that character. I played a lot of dicks, and you can't wait to shed them when it's over, And this was one where I was like, can we do a sequel? What about 21st century men? Like,
Which is called Alien Covenant.
Which is called Alien Covenant in theaters May 15th. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for coming out.
Thank
Billy
you all
Crudup.
very much for seeing it. Thank you.